World War II was the deadliest conflict in human history, claiming over 70 million lives and reshaping the global order. Behind the grand strategies and heroic sacrifices were military leaders who made decisions that could alter the course of entire campaigns. Some of these decisions were brilliant, turning the tide of battle. Others were catastrophic, costing countless lives and squandering victory. Today we examine the worst decisions made by generals during World War II. These are not simple mistakes made in the heat of battle, but fundamental errors in judgment, failures of imagination, and displays of arrogance that had devastating consequences. From Hitler's interference in military operations to the stubborn refusal of commanders to adapt, these decisions reveal the human flaws behind history's greatest conflict. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. It was the largest military operation in history, involving over 3 million German troops. Hitler believed the Soviet Union would collapse within weeks, famously declaring, "We have only to kick in the door, and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down." This decision to invade the Soviet Union while still fighting Britain was perhaps the single worst strategic decision of the entire war. Hitler opened a two-front war, the very scenario that had doomed Germany in World War I. Hitler's interference in military planning proved disastrous. Against the advice of his generals, he divided his forces into 3 main army groups, diluting the concentration of force needed for a decisive blow. Army Group North targeted Leningrad, Army Group Center drove towards Moscow, and Army Group South aimed for Ukraine's resources. The German High Command wanted to focus entirely on Moscow, the political, industrial, and transportation hub of the Soviet Union. Capturing Moscow could have paralyzed Soviet resistance, but Hitler overruled them, insisting on capturing economic targets and Leningrad for propaganda purposes. Even worse, Hitler assumed the campaign would be over before winter. The German army was not equipped for winter warfare. When the harsh Russian winter arrived in late 1941, German soldiers were still wearing summer uniforms. Weapons froze, vehicles wouldn't start, and frostbite became as deadly as Soviet bullets. The failure to capture Moscow before winter, combined with vastly underestimating Soviet resistance and resources, turned Operation Barbarossa from a quick victory into a protracted nightmare. The Eastern Front would consume the Wehrmacht, resulting in an estimated 80% of German military casualties during the war. In May 1940, the German Blitzkrieg had achieved stunning success. The Wehrmacht had outmaneuvered Allied forces, trapping the British Expeditionary Force and French troops against the English Channel at Dunkirk. Over 400,000 Allied soldiers were cornered with their backs to the sea. The German army was poised to annihilate them. Then Hitler made one of his most puzzling decisions. On May 24, 1940, Hitler personally issued a halt order, stopping German tanks just 10 miles from Dunkirk. For 3 crucial days, the panzers sat idle, while the British organized a desperate evacuation. Hitler's reasoning remains debated. Some say he wanted to preserve his tanks for the coming fight for the rest of France. Others believe he thought the Luftwaffe could finish the job from the air. Some historians suggest he hoped Britain would negotiate peace if he didn't humiliate their army. Whatever the reason, the decision was catastrophic for Germany. Between May 26th and June 4th, Operation Dynamo evacuated 338,226 Allied troops from Dunkirk, using a fleet of military vessels and civilian boats. While the British were forced to abandon equipment, they saved the core of their professional army. These soldiers would fight another day. Churchill called it a miracle of deliverance, but it was really a German mistake. Had Hitler allowed his panzers to advance, Britain might have lost its entire army, potentially forcing a negotiated peace. Instead, Britain remained in the war, providing a base for the eventual liberation of Europe. On December 11, 1941, just 4 days after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Adolf Hitler made another catastrophic decision. He declared war on the United States. Germany was not obligated to do this. The tripartite pact with Japan only required Germany to assist if Japan were attacked, not if Japan attacked first. The United States had been providing aid to Britain and the Soviet Union, but was not yet directly involved in the European war. American public opinion was divided, with powerful isolationist sentiment opposing entry into another European conflict. Hitler could have let America focus entirely on Japan in the Pacific. Instead, Hitler gratuitously declared war on the world's largest industrial power. This decision handed President Franklin Roosevelt exactly what he needed: justification to fully commit American resources to defeating Germany first, before dealing with Japan. The United States possessed industrial capacity that dwarfed Germany's. American factories would produce 300,000 aircraft, 88,000 tanks, and 3 million machine guns during the war. American shipyards launched cargo ships faster than German U-boats could sink them. The sheer weight of American industrial might would crush the Axis powers. Hitler's declaration of war on the United States ensured Germany would face an enemy it could not defeat through attrition. It was a decision born of arrogance and ideology, not strategic thinking. In the summer of 1942, Hitler launched Case Blue, a massive offensive aimed at capturing the oil fields of the Caucasus. The plan was sound. Germany desperately needed oil to fuel its war machine, but Hitler's obsession with symbolism would doom the operation. The city of Stalingrad, named after Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, held little strategic value. It was one of many industrial cities along the Volga River, but Hitler became fixated on capturing it, believing its psychological and propaganda value was worth the cost. Hitler diverted substantial forces from the main objective in the Caucasus to assault Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army under General Friedrich Paulus was ordered to take the city at all costs. What followed was 5 months of brutal urban warfare, with fighting for individual buildings, rooms, and even floors. Soviet defenders led by General Vasily Chuikov turned the city into a meat grinder. The ruins favored defense, negating German advantages in armor and air support. Every building became a fortress. Soviet snipers, including the famous Vasily Zaitsev, took a deadly toll. In November 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, a massive pincer movement that encircled the entire Sixth Army. Over 250,000 German troops were trapped in Stalingrad. Hitler's next decision was even worse. He forbade any attempt to break out, promising that air supply would sustain the army. Hermann Göring assured Hitler the Luftwaffe could deliver 500 tons of supplies daily. They never came close, managing at best 100 tons per day. German soldiers starved and froze in the ruins. General Paulus begged for permission to attempt a breakout while it was still possible. Hitler refused, promoting Paulus to field marshal with the cynical expectation that he would commit suicide rather than surrender, as no German field marshal had ever surrendered. On February 2, 1943, Paulus surrendered anyway. Of the 250,000 men encircled, only about 5,000 would ever return to Germany. Stalingrad was the turning point on the Eastern Front. The myth of German invincibility was shattered. Hitler's obsession with a symbolic target had cost Germany its finest army and any chance of victory in the East. After Stalingrad, Hitler became increasingly paranoid about military retreats. He issued stand-fast orders forbidding German commanders from conducting tactical withdrawals even when strategically necessary. Units were ordered to hold positions to the last man, regardless of encirclement or impossibility of supply. This inflexibility cost Germany dearly. Competent commanders who might have saved their forces through strategic retreat were instead forced to watch their armies be destroyed in place. At the Battle of the Korsun-Cherkasy Pocket in early 1944, over 60,000 German troops were encircled. Hitler initially refused permission to break out. When he finally relented, it was too late. Thousands were killed or captured when a more timely retreat could have saved the force. Similarly, Army Group North was trapped in the Korsun Pocket in Latvia from October 1944 until the end of the war. Over 200,000 experienced soldiers were isolated and useless, unable to affect the war's outcome. Hitler refused to evacuate them by sea, insisting they tie down Soviet forces. Instead, they simply withered away as the war moved past them. These no-retreat orders reflected Hitler's fundamental misunderstanding of military strategy. He saw every withdrawal as defeatism, rather than recognizing that strategic flexibility is essential to preserve combat power. By forcing his armies to stand and die, Hitler accelerated Germany's defeat. Germany developed the world's first operational jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Mi-262. This revolutionary aircraft was faster than any Allied fighter, reaching speeds of 540 miles per hour, compared to 440 miles per hour for the best piston-engine fighters. Armed with 430 mm cannons, it could devastate Allied bomber formations. The Mi-262 entered testing in 1942 and could have been operational by 1943. German pilots who flew it called it a miracle weapon that could have restored German air superiority, but Hitler's interference delayed and nearly destroyed the program. When Hitler first saw the Mi-262, he became obsessed with using it as a fast bomber rather than a fighter. Despite desperate pleas from his generals and pilots, who explained the plane was designed as an interceptor, Hitler ordered it modified to carry bombs. This redesign delayed production by crucial months. By the time Hitler relented and allowed the Mi-262 to be produced as a fighter in late 1944, it was too late. Allied air superiority was overwhelming. The Mi-262 suffered from chronic fuel shortages, inadequate pilot training, and vulnerability during takeoff and landing. Only about 1,400 Mi-262s were produced, and fewer than 300 saw combat. While they shot down Allied aircraft at impressive rates, there were too few to affect the war's outcome. Had Hitler prioritized jet fighter production in 1943, instead of diverting resources to his bomber obsession, the air war over Germany might have taken a dramatically different course. This decision cost Germany perhaps its last technological advantage and demonstrated Hitler's fundamental inability to understand modern warfare. On October 28, 1940, Italian dictator Benito Mussolini launched an invasion of Greece from Italian-occupied Albania. Mussolini was jealous of Hitler's military successes and wanted to demonstrate that Italy could achieve victories independently. He told his generals, "Hitler always faces me with a fait accompli. This time I am going to pay him back in his own coin." It was a disaster from the start. Mussolini ordered the invasion without adequate preparation and against the advice of his military commanders. The Italian forces were poorly equipped for mountain warfare. The Greeks, fighting to defend their homeland, proved fierce opponents. Within weeks, the Greek army had not only stopped the Italian advance, but launched a counter-offensive that pushed deep into Italian-controlled Albania. The Italian military suffered from poor logistics, inadequate winter clothing, and low morale. Mussolini had promised a quick victory. Instead, his army was being humiliated by a much smaller nation. Hitler was furious. He had been planning Operation Barbarossa for spring 1941 and didn't want complications in the Balkans. Now he had to divert forces to rescue Mussolini's failed adventure. In April 1941, Germany invaded Greece and Yugoslavia, quickly overwhelming both nations, but at a significant cost. The Balkans campaign delayed Operation Barbarossa by several crucial weeks. Those weeks proved critical. When the Germans finally launched their invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, they had lost valuable time. Many historians believe that if Operation Barbarossa had begun in early May as originally planned, German forces might have captured Moscow before winter. Mussolini's vanity project in Greece thus had far-reaching consequences, potentially altering the entire course of the Eastern Front. On February 15, 1942, British Lieutenant General Arthur Percival surrendered Singapore to Japanese forces, handing over approximately 80,000 troops in what Churchill called the worst disaster in British military history. The fall of Singapore was a catastrophic blow to British prestige and a stunning victory for Japan. But Singapore should never have fallen. The British garrison outnumbered the attacking Japanese forces, and the island fortress was supposed to be impregnable. What went wrong? The fundamental error was strategic myopia. Singapore's defences were designed to repel an attack from the sea. Massive coastal artillery batteries pointed out toward the ocean, ready to destroy any naval assault. But the British failed to adequately fortify the landward side, assuming the jungles of Malaya were impassable. The Japanese, under General Tomoyuki Yamashita, proved this assumption spectacularly wrong. They advanced rapidly down the Malayan Peninsula using bicycles and light tanks, outmaneuvering British forces. When they reached Singapore, they attacked from the north, the land side where defences were weakest. General Percival proved indecisive and defeatist throughout the campaign. He failed to launch aggressive counterattacks, dispersed his forces ineffectively, and surrendered while his forces still had ammunition and capacity to fight. The Japanese had been running low on supplies and ammunition, and Yamashita later admitted he expected a longer fight. Percival cited concerns about civilian casualties and water supply as reasons for surrender, but these were largely pretexts. A more aggressive commander might have turned the tables on the Japanese. Instead, Percival handed Japan one of its greatest victories and condemned thousands of British, Indian, and Australian troops to brutal captivity in Japanese prisoner-of-war camps. The Maginot Line was a massive system of fortifications built by France along its border with Germany during the 1930s. It was an engineering marvel, featuring underground barracks, rail lines, air conditioning, and interlocking fields of fire. The French believed it made their border impregnable. They were wrong. The fundamental flaw of the Maginot Line was not its construction but the mentality it represented. French military thinking was stuck in World War I, focused on static defense and attrition. They failed to understand how mobile warfare had evolved with tanks, aircraft, and mechanized infantry. When Germany attacked in May 1940, they simply went around the Maginot Line. German armour thrust through the Ardennes forest in Belgium, which French generals had declared impassable to tanks. the Germans proved them wrong, achieving complete surprise. The Maginot Line defenders watched helplessly as the German army bypassed them entirely. Many Maginot Line fortifications never fired a shot. The massive investment in static defences proved useless against mobile warfare. The French High Command, led by generals who had fought in World War I, proved unable to adapt to the new reality of warfare. General Maurice Gamelin, the French commander-in-chief, was elderly and out of touch. When the German breakthrough came, the French command structure collapsed. Within 6 weeks, France, which had been considered to have the world's finest army, was defeated. The Maginot Line mentality, rigid and backward-looking, exemplified how generals fighting the last war can lose the current one. In September 1944, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery proposed an audacious plan to end the war by Christmas. Operation Market Garden would use airborne troops to capture a series of bridges in the Netherlands, creating a corridor for armoured forces to advance into Germany's industrial heartland and bypass the Siegfried Line. It was the largest airborne operation in history, involving over 35,000 paratroopers. It was also one of the war's greatest failures. The plan was overly complex, requiring everything to go perfectly. Paratroopers would capture bridges at Eindhoven, Nijmegen and Arnhem, while ground forces of Taschek's corps advanced up a single highway to link up with Flem. If any bridge wasn't captured or if the ground advance was delayed, the entire operation would fail. Montgomery ignored intelligence warnings that 2 SS Panzer divisions were refitting near Arnhem. He dismissed concerns about the narrow advance route, which left ground forces vulnerable. He rejected suggestions to modify the plan, convinced of its brilliance. The operation began on September 17, 1944. While the drops at Eindhoven and Nijmegen eventually succeeded, the Arnhem drop was a disaster. British paratroopers landed too far from their objective and faced unexpected German armour. The ground advance stalled due to fierce resistance and the narrow corridor. At Arnhem, the British 1st Airborne Division fought desperately to hold the bridge, but reinforcements never arrived. After 9 days of brutal combat, the survivors were forced to withdraw. Of the 10,000 men who landed at Arnhem, only 2,000 escaped. The rest were killed or captured. Operation Market Garden failed to achieve any of its objectives. Instead of ending the war in 1944, it demonstrated the dangers of overambition and inadequate planning. Montgomery's insistence on proceeding, despite warnings, cost thousands of lives and delayed the Allied advance. The war would continue for another 8 months. These decisions, made by generals and dictators during World War II, remind us that leadership matters profoundly in war. Technical superiority, industrial capacity, and courage of soldiers can all be squandered through poor strategic choices. Several patterns emerge from these failures. Hitler's interference in military operations consistently proved disastrous, from halting at Dunkirk to obsessing over Stalingrad to misusing the Me-262. His refusal to allow retreats and his tendency to make decisions based on ideology rather than military reality doomed Germany's chances. Other commanders like Percival and the French High Command failed because they couldn't adapt to new realities of warfare. They prepared for the last war instead of the current one, with catastrophic results. Montgomery's failure at Market Garden shows how even successful commanders can fall prey to overconfidence, ignoring intelligence and dismissing reasonable concerns in pursuit of glory. These mistakes cost millions of lives and prolonged the war. They serve as enduring lessons in the importance of flexible thinking, realistic assessment of capabilities, and the willingness to listen to professional military advice rather than allowing ego, ideology, or wishful thinking to guide strategy. The worst decisions of World War II were not inevitable. They were choices made by individuals who, for various reasons, prioritized the wrong factors or failed to grasp military reality. Understanding these failures helps us appreciate not just what went wrong, but what leadership in crisis truly requires. Humility, adaptability, and the courage to make difficult decisions based on facts rather than fantasies.